One of the most common types of issues we deal with clients with difficult title problems for motor vehicles. And the reason it's difficult is the title is a legal government document that's issued only by government agencies. And unless you have all your ducks in a row, they're going to give you a hard time on issuing you a title. So this is why a lot of people run into these types of problems getting a new title in their name for a motor vehicle. So we're going to jump right in and we're going to talk about a few subjects. And what we're going to cover in the presentation are the requirements for getting a title, what the difference is between a duplicate title and a title recovery, big difference. Also, abandoned vehicles, what are the misconceptions surrounding abandoned vehicles and mechanics liens. That's another thing that there's a lot of common misconceptions around. There's also the famous or infamous Vermont loophole, and is that a good way to go or not, and what the holdups might be there. We'll talk about lien releases and lien holder issues. Bonded titles is one method of getting a title that's often overlooked. We'll discuss that. Court order titles, and also how all these relate to the new calendar year, 2023. As the presentation is going, if you do have questions, type them into the chat. We'll keep an eye on them. If there are things that will be covered in our regular content, we'll cover those when that subject comes up. And we'll have some time at the end to answer some other questions that come in from the chat or also from some of our live viewers that are emailing in. Expect about 25 minutes for the primary presentation, and at the end we'll have some time for the questions. So this is the list of subjects, and we may kind of go off on a tangent on some of these as well. So the first thing to get into is, what is a title and why is it needed? A title is a legal government document. You can see the picture on the left. This is an example of a vehicle title. You notice it is a certificate. It is it's not just a blank piece of paper. It's not something you can print off from the internet. It's something which is a official form. It's kind of like money. See all the scroll work and all the watermarks on the back? It's a legal document which is issued by an agency. Most states, that agency is called Department of Motor Vehicles, Secretary of State. Some states call it the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. And remember, you can't buy a title from a company. You can't download one from the internet. It only comes from the government agency. Now, if you look at an example, this happens to be from the state of Oregon on the right. What are the requirements for getting a title? If you look at requirement number 2, it says you need the original title or ownership document from the last owner. So in order to get a new title, you're supposed to have the last title from the last owner signed over to you. But if you're here watching this, it's probably because you want to know how to get a title if you don't have the old title. That's the whole trick. If you had the old title, you really wouldn't need much help. You just bring that to the DMV, turn it in, and they give you a new title. So how does this all work? Well, first, a duplicate title is something a lot of people ask about. Hey, I just want to get a duplicate. I want to get a replacement. I want to file for a lost title. Well, a lost title or duplicate title is when you had a title with your name on it printed from the DMV and you just lost it and you want to get a replacement of the old certificate. The only person in the world that can apply for a replacement title certificate is the person who's in the title records. Nobody else can apply for a lost title, duplicate, replacement. If you try to get one as a replacement, they're going to look it up and say, no, this title is in the name of Joe Schmo. You're not Joe Schmo, so get out of here, right? So if you notice, here's an application for a replacement title. Section 1, registered owner of record, right? That has to match who's asking for it. So when you put an application in for a replacement, unless you are the registered owner, you're not getting a replacement, right? So the alternative to that is you can do a bonded title. You can see at the top these 4 green examples. You could do a civil lien, sometimes called a court order title or writ of mandamus. You can do a Vermont loophole, which we'll talk about, or a prior owner transfer. And we'll cover all these in more detail. If you notice on the right, there's 2 things to avoid. You should avoid a mechanics lien or an abandoned vehicle. And we'll talk about why. But specifically, an abandoned vehicle is a status of a vehicle when everybody abandons it. If nobody wants it and literally everybody just wants to, it's like a hot potato, if it's declared to be abandoned, you have to surrender it to the state and they auction it off. So a lot of people think, I'll just file for an abandoned vehicle and I'll get a title. Well, guess what? Abandoned vehicles are not finders keepers. You can't just claim any vehicle you find. Now, granted, if somebody left it on your property or they gave it to you and didn't give you the title, you probably can get a title, but don't call it abandoned, because as soon as you start declaring it to be abandoned, you'll probably lose rights to the vehicle. So let's talk about the Vermont loophole. That's the one that everybody always asks about. It's infamous. It's been mentioned in Car and Driver, Jalopnik, Hagerty Insurance. Many media publications have talked about the Vermont loophole. And the way it works is you apply by mail to the state of Vermont remotely. You don't have to live there. You don't have to go there. You do it by mail, and you get a registration. It's called a registration ownership. It's not a title, but it is a version of an ownership document that you can get with only having a bill of sale. You don't have to have the prior title in order to get a Vermont registration. With that bill of sale, you get the Vermont registration. You don't have to do inspection. You don't have to live in Vermont. The car doesn't have to go to Vermont. It's easy to do. However, there's a couple downsides. First of all, you have to pay sales tax on the vehicle in order to get that registration. And the sales tax is based on the full retail book value of the vehicle. It's not based on your bill of sale, what you think it's worth, or any lower value. It's based on the book value. Also, there's a risk that you could get this Vermont registration, even though that's their version of a title, and you could bring it to your state, and your state could say, no, this is not a title, get out of here. Most states accept it. Most people find it's not a problem, but there are some states that occasionally will go through a few months where they give people a hard time, or they give you the runaround, or you might find one clerk at one DMV doesn't like it. In fact, you see on the bottom, there's a bulletin. This happens to be from Florida. Fraud alert, Vermont registration. Last year in June, they put this right on their website, which means that Florida's going to give you a hard time. There's been other states that have done this. Indiana had big notes on their window for a couple months, and they took them down. So this comes and goes, but there's a risk that you might not be able to switch it over in your state. So those are the pros and cons to the Vermont loophole way of getting a title. The other method is, let's go back a page, is a civil lien. This is also known as a court order title or a magistrate title. This is a great way to get a title. If you notice, we have checked off good, better, best. This is the best way to get a title. It's kind of like doing a mechanics lien, where you've heard about mechanics liens, but it's the civilian version of that. In fact, many states have this right in their instructions. Here's a screenshot from the clerk of courts. This one happens to be from Ohio. They have a court order titles section, right? The way it works is you go to the court in the county where you reside. You don't have to go out of state to Vermont to the headquarters of DMV. You go right where you live, and you file 3 documents: a petition, a letter of non-interest, and an affidavit. Basically what you're saying to the court is, I own this vehicle. I swear to God I have possession of it. Here's my VIN number. I don't know anybody who's looking for it. I'm fair and square the owner, and I don't know about any stolen liens or salvage or anything that is nefarious. You file those with the court. They're going to give you what's called a response date. Usually it's 2 or 3 weeks out, maybe a little longer in some jurisdictions. Remember, there's 3,611 counties in the country. Every county does it a little bit different. So this is just a generality of how it works. They're going to give you a response date 2 to 3 weeks out, maybe 4 weeks. On that date, they're going to tell you, we need a picture of the VIN number to prove you're in possession. We need a copy of your driver's license, something. They might need a copy of your bill of sale. You give them those documents, and they give you what's called a judgment of ownership. That is your golden ticket. That gives you the right to go into the DMV, slap it on the counter, and get your title. Now, do you have to go to court? It depends. Most courts don't want more people in their courthouse. They want to keep everybody out. In fact, for the last 2 or 3 years, everything was like this on Zoom, on video, right? Even criminal cases, people appeared by video. So for a little rinky-dink nickel and dime case like a court order title, they probably don't want you to come there. Now, they can ask anybody to come into court that they want. Sometimes what they want you to do is just walk in the door, go to the clerk's office, raise your right hand, swear under oath that everything you said is true, and walk out the door. You don't have to go into some big trial in most cases. But remember, any county can do whatever they want, but most of the time we see counties want to keep people out of their courthouse rather than get people to come in the door. So that's a very powerful way to get a title. We highly recommend it. There's a whole description of how to do it on our website, and it's more powerful. In fact, the reason it's good is because you're going over the head of the DMV. The DMV has certain requirements, certain paperwork, certain rules, and they're very bureaucratic. In fact, DMV is like a punchline to jokes on sitcoms all the time. This is going over their head, and the court is there to try to help you. Another way to get a title is a bonded title. Bonded title. That is a process where you get a surety bond, and this document is an example of a surety bond. That is a company, a bonding company, kind of like an insurance policy that backs up your statements. You say, I own this car, I bought this car fair and square, it's all good. The bonding company says, what this person is saying verbally, we'll back it up with this document. So you have to buy this bond. It guarantees what you're saying for the DMV. The DMV says, yeah, okay, we believe what you're saying, but we want somebody to kind of be a little more significant than you to back this up. You buy this bond, they back it up. What are the downsides? Well, first of all, it's a branded title. When you get your title, it's going to say bonded on it in big red letters, which sometimes people don't like that because it makes it difficult to sell or difficult to finance. So you might want to avoid that if you want to sell the car. You also have a loss of ownership, meaning that if some prior owner or lien holder comes forward 2 or 3 years later and says, hey, that's my car, you have to pay back their loss. Even though the bonding company guarantees it, the loss is still on you. You have that payback obligation. The other downside is not every state does this. There's about 32 or 34 states that do it. The other 12 or 13 don't. So you can check the list on our website to see if your state does bonded titles. Now, the good news is if you get a bonded title, after 3 or 4 years, the bond stamp falls off the title and you have a clear title. What about a prior owner transfer? This is where you get the last owner to get a duplicate. And you may have tried this already by calling them or sending them a Facebook message, but that's not going to work. What you want to do is get the official form. Here's an example of a duplicate title form. Print it out, fill it in 100%, type it up with the year, make, model, VIN number, everything about that vehicle, and send it by mail to the last owner. We have an example here of a letter. Don't call them. Don't email them. Don't text message them. Don't Facebook message them, because it's kind of like, who's this person contacting me out of the blue for this car I owned 5 years ago? They think it's a scam or identity theft or fraud. They're going to ignore you or block you. But if you fill out this form, type it up nice and neat, and mail it to them and say, hey, look, remember that car you used to have? I'm trying to get it out of your name so you don't have any more liability. Just sign it here, mail it back, I'll take care of everything. Now the person doesn't have to do any work, right? You're not asking them to go and wait in line at DMV. You're not asking them to deal with the hassle of DMV. All they got to do is sign it, put a return envelope in that mailing, put a stamp on the envelope, right? Because everybody this day and age does online bill pay. Nobody has stamps or envelopes sitting around their house. So they might sign the document and go to mail it. They don't have an envelope. Now they throw it away. So use those two details to your advantage so you don't miss out on somebody who wants to help you and you make it hard for them. Now, here's a big question that comes up. What about a lien release? What if you have a vehicle that has a lien on it? That's going to block any title you try to do. If your vehicle has a lien on the record, in the official title record for the DMV, it's blocked. So what you want to do is you have to get a lien release signed so that the DMV will take it off of that record. They'll erase it from the lien record. They'll make it a clear title. Well, how do you do that? Well, there's a form. Here's 2 examples. One is from, I think, Oregon. The other one looks like, I think it's Texas. You have to get that form signed. How do you get it signed? Same way as the prior owner. Fill it out, type it up, mail it to the lien holder with a letter. Hey, remember that vehicle you had a lien on it? Just sign this and send it back. If the lien holder is a company, send it to 5 different places for that company. Their main office, their branch office, their local office. Anybody you can find, send it there. All you need is 1 to come back, right? So by sending 5, you have 5 times the chances that it's going to come back. What if it doesn't come back? What if they Throw it away. What if you never hear from them? Well, now you go back to that court order title. You can tell the court, look, I asked the lien holder to release the lien. They never got back to me, so will you sign this? If the court signs it, it's just as good as the lien holder. You should probably try the lien holder first, because if you don't, the court's going to ask you, well, there's a lien. Why didn't you try to contact a lien holder? And now you're going to be kind of in bad shape. So try the lien holder first before you do the court order title. You might be thinking, what if there's money owed on the vehicle? Well, what if there is? Here's the thing. Even if there's money owed, more than likely, it's not a current loan. Many times the loan is charge off or write off, or it's in deferral. The banks don't want the car. They want money. And if they see that the person who's contacting them is not their borrower, you're not the person that is delinquent on the loan, you're not the person that charged off the loan, they're going to see you're an innocent third party. Many times they're just going to send you that lien release just to get you out of their hair, and many times the person who gets that in the mail doesn't even know. They just sign it and send it back. So even with money owed on a car, many times sending this lien release in that fashion will work. However, don't leave out any steps. Don't leave out the return envelope. Don't leave out the stamp. Type up this form. Don't handwrite it all chicken scratch, because if you do, the person might say, I can't read this. I have to look it up. Once they start getting into that rabbit hole of researching the vehicle, they might find that money owed, and then it gets blocked. So make it easy for them to help you out. Here are some links for some different services for vehicle titles. Our main website is Car Titles. We also have a website specifically for lien releases. We have a website for parts-only vehicles, junk cars, parts-only cars, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. Lien titles covers things like mechanics liens and those civil liens, those court order titles. Auction titles is for dealers. We also have a division that's a private investigative agency. If you need to look up prior owners, you need to look up history of vehicles. For surety bonds, there's a bonding agency listed there. And you can also arrange consulting with a title agent through our consulting live scheduling at TelAdvice. Now here's the thing. Vehicles that have a brand on the title record, things like salvage or rebuilt or certificate of destruction, all bets are off. All the prior rules goes out the window. Here's why. Anything that has a title brand on the record is going to be in a national federal record system. It's called the National Motor Vehicle Title Information System, NMVTIS. It's very important that you are aware of that, because if it's flagged in that system as either salvage, rebuilt, certificate of destruction, non-repairable, before you can do anything with the title, it has to be inspected. In fact, if it's a branded vehicle as being parts only or certificate of destruction, you can't even get it inspected. That vehicle is for literally parts only. That VIN number has been canceled in the national federal database so that it's ineligible for a title in all 50 states, plus Guam, plus Puerto Rico, plus Washington, D.C. Can't go anywhere. You can only sell the parts off it. But if it's a rebuilt or salvage, you can inspect it and then put it back on the road. But you have to do that inspection before you start working on a title, because they can't even entertain the idea of doing a title until they know the vehicle is eligible. To be eligible, it has to be safe for the road. And in the case of a salvage, you have to have the proper documentation showing that all the items were fixed. So this is something that comes up a lot with vehicles that are branded. A lot of these cars come from Copart or IAA, two big auctions that sell vehicles that are branded. Now, we're going to get back to liens, because there's a circumstance coming up that in the last few days, it's been high profile in the news, and in the next few months or year, it'll be even more. There's these dealerships that are starting to go out of business, and they may have sold you a vehicle and then closed down before they transferred your title. Maybe they sold you a vehicle, did a loan for you, and then you've been paying on it for a year, and now they shut down. What do you do if the dealership that sold you the car, or the lien holder that's lending you the money, sometimes they're one and the same, has shut down, they go out of business? Well, that's going to create a problem, because Remember, only the lien holder can sign that lien release document. Has to be the lien holder. If they're out of business, what do? Well, here's what you do to start. Find out who is what's called the registered owner, the registered agent of that business, the registered agent. Every legitimate corporation or entity has a person designated as a registered agent. It's a person in the records of that company that is authorized to receive filings, to receive notices, to receive service of process if you're suing them, and sign on their behalf. Every company has to have one. Even if they shut down, that registered agent is the authorized identity. So you want to send your lien release to them, or your prior owner transfer to them. Try to get them to sign it before the company goes too far south. When a company first shuts down and they stop operating, for several months, they're in what's called winding down mode. They're still, their office might be closed, the door might be locked, lights are off, but they're still finishing up their last activities. That registered agent can still sign those documents. So get that to them as soon as you can. If it's a long time later, maybe 2 or 3 years later, and the lien holder shut down or the dealer shut down, what do you do then? Well, every state has a dealer licensing board. It's a agency within that state that issues licenses to automotive retailers, car dealers. They issue licenses to lenders, and that licensing board carries what's called a surety bond, just like we talked about bonded title, on all of these dealers. Matter of fact, the dealers and lenders have to pay money every year for a surety bond. And if you are a victim of a company that's gone out of business, the licensing board can take that surety bond and apply it to you as a victim, and you can get restitution, you can get money back, you can get your title fixed. And you want to look at that first, because eventually you may have to do a court order title. But if you can go to the court order title and say, look, I already tried for this licensing division restitution fund, victims restitution, then you'll be one step ahead of the game. In fact, on our website, we have links to many of the states' victim restitution fund form, where you can fill out the form, send it in, explain your scenario, and many times they already have this dealership on file, right? You're probably not the first one that has had a loss of a title, of a lien release, of value of your vehicle from this dealer. The bigger problem you have to watch out for is if the dealer goes out of business and you traded in a car, you could have a bigger problem. What happens if you trade in a car with a loan on the car you traded in, which many people do? You go to a dealership, you have a car loan, you say, I don't want this car anymore, you trade it in. What that dealer does is they take your trade in, they pay off your loan, and they sell you a new car. But what if they close down before you pay off your loan? Well, now you have a new car with a loan, and your used car has another loan on it that's not been paid off. That could be a sticky little scenario. Your lien holder that you owe the money to, they're not going to care about you traded it in. They're going to tell you, look, you owe the money. The new car, you owe the money on that. So it's going to be a very difficult thing to unwind, and that's one of the things we work on. If you look at the list of links, that activeintel.com, that's our investigative agency. Many times we have to get into a full-blown fraud investigation to untangle those kind of things. And many times it goes right to a court order title, which, again, it's like going over the head of the DMV. If the DMV can't help you, or you're getting the runaround, go to court order. What about contacting the DMV? This is a question that comes up, and we've gotten a lot of this in email questions. I can't get a hold of DMV. Can't contact them. They don't answer the phone. Nobody to call. How do you get a hold of them? Well, that's true. And how do we know that? Well, here's what happens. People call the DMV, or they try to call the DMV, can't get through, and they say, well, I'll just call this title company. They do a Google search. We pop up in the Google results, and they call us. Well, guess what? We get over 1,000 calls a day from people trying to get answers on title issues. We end up being free customer service for the DMV, which we don't mind doing. We like helping people out, but the DMV can't help you. The best thing to do, if you need to actually get information, first, use our website as a free consumer resource. There's over 1,000 videos, over 800 documents you can download, gives you most of the answers that you want. But if you do need to get to the DMV, go in person. I know it's a pain in the neck. Nobody likes going there, but make an appointment. Make sure you bring your ID. Many times they can't do anything unless you have a photo ID, and ask them the questions. If the questions are anything that's crucial for you to rely on, get the answers in writing. I can't tell you how many times we've had customers that have said, hey, I went to DMV, I asked them a question, they said, yeah, no problem, you can do this. I went back a month later and they said, no way, this doesn't qualify. And they said, well, the other person told me I could do it. And they said, I don't care what they told you, you can't do it. Because the DMV is a high turnover type agency, right? They're good people, they mean well, but there's a lot of turnover, there's a lot of budget constraints, they don't have a lot of training, so maybe the person you talk to didn't have the right info for your scenario. So get it in writing if you can, to make sure you're not going to be blocked at a later date. So based on that, let's see what other questions we have. If you have questions, feel free to type them. One of the things that we've heard quite a bit is, what happens if you have a title, a document, and it's damaged, or the DMV tells you it's damaged? And by damage, I mean it gets burnt, spilled coffee on it, or you cross something out, or you have whiteout. What happens then? Well, that's a problem, because any legal title certificate is only valid if it's undamaged. And damage, in quotes, could mean anything. We have even clients that have highlighted something for somebody to sign, and they said that's void. It voids the title. It's like you don't even have it. So if you have a title document, if it's signed over to you, go right away. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Go right to DMV and get you a new fresh title with your name printed on the front. Get your name in their system as the owner, because that way, if you lose that title, if it's damaged, if it gets burned in a fire, you can just go down and get a duplicate. But if you have a title from an old owner that's just signed over to you, the only person that knows your name is on it is you looking at the title. The DMV doesn't know that title signed over to you. There's nothing in their records that show you as the owner. So you don't want to be in that vulnerable position for too long. You want to get the new fresh title with your name on it as soon as you can, so that way if something does happen, you now have the privilege and authority to go to DMV and say, give me my duplicate, right? You don't have to deal with hassles. So consider titles to be very sacred. Get it in your name. Put your name on the record. If there's a lien, make sure you get that lien removed as soon as possible, because the sooner you do it, the better. The longer you wait, sometimes lien holders go out of business or they're harder to find, and that makes your lien release more difficult. The last thing is, people say, well, my car is old, beat up, and why is this so hard to get a title? Well, here's the thing. The DMV doesn't consider the condition or value of a car to make it easier or harder to get a car. You might think, well, if it's $1 million car, it should be harder than if it's a $100 car. They don't look at it that way. As far as they're concerned, a title is a title. It's somebody's car. Even that $100 car, when they give you a title, it's not so much they're giving you a title, they're taking the ownership away from somebody else, because that title says you are the exclusive owner to the exclusion of everybody else. And until they're sure that that's okay, they're not going to grant you that wish of giving you that golden ticket of that title. Because once they do, now everybody else is frozen out. Even if it's a $100 car, they don't want to be giving away somebody else's car without the proper documentation. So it could be bonded title, it could be court order, it could be prior owner transfer. You want to get all your ducks in a row, because until you have that magic piece of paper with your name printed on the front, you are at risk of not owning that car. The value doesn't matter. You know, a cheap car is just as hard to get a title as an expensive car if you don't have the right documentation. So keep an eye on our channel for future videos. We'll cover more things. If you do have questions, you can email our help desk. You see the email right there, help@cartitles.com. Our phone number is also on this slide. Excuse me, on this slide. That TeleAdvice link, you can also arrange for a live one-on-one undivided attention with a title agent that can help you with a specific problem. And we're glad to be of assistance. We know how hard it is to get titles, and we know what it's like to deal with the DMV and all their bureaucracy. So we appreciate you showing up. If you have questions, email us, and we'll see you on the next video.